Hi guys and welcome back to SwitchUp. Today Glenn and I thought we'd look at the first-person shooter games that there are on the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, so everyone knows by now that obviously there isn't a Call of Duty game on the Switch just yet, and that is bizarre in itself, but what is there? So let's have a look, shall we?
The first two games we're going to talk about are Turok 1 and 2. If you want to check out a review of the first one on Switch, they did an excellent job of making motion controls work well. There's no drifting happening here, and the overall control of your character is much better than it was back on the Nintendo 64.
Yeah, I think it's also important to mention that they've removed a lot of the fog that plagued those games. Obviously back in the day it was essential for it to be able to run on the 64, but that has been removed from these versions. Another thing to mention possibly that may affect some people's judgment is that Toric 2 has had the multiplayer removed from it as well. Whether the multiplayer was ever a selling point of that particular game, I'm not so sure. I think Rage Wars was more for that, but it's not there nonetheless.
Let's be honest, after about a week there'd be no one online, would there? Shame. The next games are retro releases of Doom 1 and 2 as well as 3. Now the first two games actually have split screen co-op, and Glenn and I discovered that is fantastic even today.
Yeah, I must admit I'd never actually played a lot of the original Doom back in the day. I did play a fair chunk of Doom 64 but not the first one, and playing it in co-op was a great amount of fun. When you throw in the fact that it's what, £3.99 or whatever the regional equivalent is, this is a really decent pickup.
A few people have been having an issue with the DRM login that you have to do with a lot of these Bethesda titles. It's a bit strange, but didn't cost me too much time, to be honest, to set up an account. The third game's available, and it's the 3D one. It's kind of the precursor before they reinvented Doom with the Doom 2016 release, which we'll talk about next. Interestingly, I used to be a massive PC gamer. I almost said nerd then. That would not have been right. And just as I got my Nintendo Switch, Doom came out on the PC, but for some reason I just didn't have the time to play it. So when it arrived from Panic Button on the Nintendo, no one was expecting much, and to be honest, no one could believe it was there, and they did a brilliant job. Yes, it was slightly blurry, but it was everything you knew and loved about the Doom game back on PC.
Yeah, I haven't played this one on the Switch, but I do own it on the PS4. And it's a great game. It's very hectic, isn't it? You get locked into arenas and you have to clear a certain amount of enemies before you can get out. You can pull limbs off enemies and beat them to death with their own appendages, which is always fun. It's funny, when this was released for the Switch and they had that kind of retro look on the box cover, it made me very much want the original games to come to the Switch, and as we've just mentioned, obviously that then happened.
The next first-person shooters we want to talk about are the Wolfenstein series, and firstly let's just talk about 2 before we get onto that that new game. The first game was the one that introduced BJ Blazkowicz. He was a brilliant character, and it was Bethesda showing what they can do really well by creating these stories. They completely reinvented the series with this game. The combat was visceral, the weapons were really nice and chunky, but it was those overblown Nazi characters that sold it to me. A really good game, as was the second one, ported to the Switch by the excellent Panic Button.
Yeah, I've not played either of these, I've got to be honest. I played the original Wolfenstein. I think it was on my cousin's Atari Jaguar. What a system that was. But yeah, no, I've not played these particular games. I do need to have a look into them, to be honest.
Yeah, they're great games, and they allowed you to be a bit more stealthy as well, which was nice. Okay, which is going to take us on to Wolfenstein Youngblood. Now, unless you've been hiding under some sort of rock, you'll know that this game has had a very mixed reaction. In fact, the majority of people have said it is the worst of the 3 games, and I think they'd be right. Unfortunately, it smacks of trying to reinvent something that wasn't broken. This is a predominantly online experience featuring 2 female leads, which is absolutely fine, but unfortunately the characterization of those 2 is just annoying. There's a load of high-fiving, doing little dances, and it just doesn't work.
It does seem quite a weird direction to take the series in, doesn't it? Having said that, you can play the original Wolfenstein in it, can't you?
Yeah, in your home base, on the arcade machine, you can play the original Wolfenstein. Is it worth the 34 quid I paid for the game? I'm going to say no. But having said all of that, in co-op, with a good partner, there's some real fun to be had here. The closest we have to a Call of Duty game right now on the Switch is a title called Modern Combat from Gameloft. Now, anyone that's played any mobile games in the last 10 years will have heard this name a lot. And don't get me wrong, they do a good job of what they do, and that's make free-to-play mobile games. Bringing it to the Switch and removing the free-to-play element and then charging a quite high price for it, in my book, just doesn't cut the mustard. Yes, they added motion controls, but it still has that free-to-play feeling about it, and the online just didn't run very well. A real shame. Okay, so the next game is one called Rico, and I think people had very high hopes for this one indeed. I know I did. And it was okay in single player. You're essentially trying to solve the Rico case, going through a series of randomly generated missions. It's essentially a floor clearing game, so you clear an entire level and then you can move on. Now, where the game shone was when you had a partner. If you know the series Rainbow Six Siege, it has some of that element to it, where you have to burst into rooms in synchronization with your partner and take out all the enemies with a slow-mo bullet time Max Payne style mechanic.
Yeah, I did enjoy this one. We had a lot of fun with this, but one thing I would say that let it down a little bit for me were the bomb missions. So you had a set amount of bombs that you had to deactivate before you could move on, but sometimes you just couldn't find them in time, and it really brought the game down. If they'd have just left it with the floor clearing, I think this would have been much better.
The next one I'd like to talk about is called City of Brass, and it was brought to us from some of the same developers that created the BioShock series. As soon as that was on the eShop, I was buying the game regardless of what it was like, to be honest, but thankfully it's quite nice. It is a roguelike in that when you die you go back to the beginning, but you unlock new abilities for your character. You visit genies through each stage and purchase tonics from them that give you unique powers. The core shooting and the whip mechanic work really nicely.
Okay, the next one then is Payday 2. Now, I own this on the Switch and have played a brief amount of it, and I've only played it in single player, and I've got to be honest, the AI of your bot teammate isn't particularly good, and that brought the experience down. However, Mark has played a fair bit of it online, and I think maybe that experience may be a better one to share.
Yeah, Payday 2 was designed for online play, and with 4 players it is brilliant if you can get a 4-man team together, and that really is the problem with the Nintendo Switch. The community just seems to dissolve on these online games. But in 4-player co-op, with one of you doing the drilling, 2 of you holding out against the guards that are trying to break in, and maybe the 3rd person just running a loot run, it's fantastic. But like Glenn said, if you're going to play single player, the AI is just pretty poor. The last game is called Immortal Redneck, and it's the closest that I've seen to a Serious Sam title on the Nintendo Switch. In this game, you are in some sort of strange alien Egyptian world where you have to enter a pyramid and work your way through, as is always the case with these roguelikes, floor to floor to get to the top. There's a few tough bosses in here, and I really like the combat. The motion controls are brilliant, and there's a skill tree that you gradually upgrade as you work your way through, dying over and over again, gradually getting stronger. Most people that bought this on my recommendation would come back to the comments saying how addicted they got to it. A good game.
Yeah, I think this is one that maybe would warrant those words hidden gem, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. There is one other game that we want to mention. We don't want to have it formally in our list because we haven't played it, but it's caught our eyes a couple of times, and that's the game Apocrypha. Now, when I saw it, it reminded me of Hexen. Looks like a mixture between Hexen and Serious Sam, and if it's anything like those, then it's going to be a good game.
As Mark said, we haven't played this one, we're not recommending it, we're more asking if anyone has played it. Please do let us know, is it any good? Yeah, Mark wants to buy it. Anyway, yeah, that's the end of our list, so thank you as always for watching. Please do let us know of any games you would recommend, or if you've played the ones we said, what did you think of them?
A big thank you to our patrons who support the channel every month. Remember, we're going for that big 60. When we hit 60 patrons, which is only 4 patrons away, we're giving every single one of those guys a free game. because, well, it's nice, isn't it? For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up.
Lovely. Yep, thanks for watching. Take it easy, and until next time, happy gaming.
Cheers, guys. See ya!